Today we're at the Wildrose Charcoal Kilns in Death Valley, and we are headed for Wildrose Peak. And the trailhead for Wildrose Peak is located right at the left end of these charcoal kilns. And you can see a whole page on the Wildrose Charcoal Kilns and the history of the charcoal kilns on LasVegasAreaTrails.com. So let's take a look at the trailhead. I just want to show you where this trailhead is and tell you a little bit about Wildrose Peak. So here we go. Here's one of the kilns. They have an awesome echo inside them. Okay, Wildrose Peak, and you can pause the video and enlarge it and read what's on there. Here is the trailhead, and Wildrose Peak is in the Panamint Mountain Range. It's the northernmost peak, and it's an ecological island rising above the much drier desert. The peak's cooler temperatures and greater moisture sustains cliff rose, phyllox, and big sagebrush. For half of the distance to the summit, the trail climbs through a woodland of mixed pinyon pines and junipers, a classic forest type of the Southwest, and a plant community that's uncommon within Death Valley National Park. Emerging from this Pygmy Forest, the trail offers increasingly sweeping views of the valley below. Less arduous and with fewer steep drop-offs than the hike to Telescope Peak, which is also on Las Vegas area trails. The Wildrose Peak trail opens earlier in the spring and closes later in the fall. So there you get a little bit about the Wildrose Peak and the trail, and I'd never heard the phrase Pygmy Forest, but I guess we're in a Pygmy Forest now. And it looks like a Pygmy Forest, and the forest gets even smaller as you go. The trees get even smaller as you go. So that's what these are called, a Pygmy Forest. What do you know? Okay, here we go. Okay, just to give you a quick look here, we're looking down at the charcoal kilns and across over toward Telescope Peak area, but Telescope Peak's way beyond that hill there. And let's get a quick 360-degree view. Here's the Pygmy Forest. You'll have to put up with me using that term a lot because it's the first time I've heard it. Pygmy Forest. Here we are. And there's the Wildrose Peak area. But I don't think that's Wildrose Peak. We'll find out when we get a little higher. And then here's looking down into the Emigrant Pass Road area and that whole valley. And then looking around, as you can see, the sun is just starting to top the hills here. Very beautiful. It's going to get even more so. Okay, so here we go. Let's go ahead and head toward Wildrose Peak. Okay, it looks like the trail is winding through this canyon, and my guess is that it's going to go up to that high point straight ahead, take a left, and then begin skirting the top of that ridge there. And my guess is that once we're on top of that ridge, we're going to be looking down into Death Valley and see some pretty spectacular views. But let's do a quick 360 here. back to the valley of Emigrant Pass Road. Over to the Pygmy Forest here. And then back up toward that ridge, the upper spine of the Panamint Mountain Range, and the ridge that overlooks Death Valley, I believe. We'll see really soon. Here we go. Definitely we're into pines and junipers. Just wanted to give you an idea of the type of plant life in the area here. And then of course we can look up and see the sun continuing to advance down this ridge ahead. And then number of cacti. Okay, let's continue. Okay, a little bit about this trail. It's 4.2 miles each way, and it's pretty amazing that here we are in a pine and juniper forest. And if we were to go about 15 miles ahead, we'd be on the desert floor of Death Valley, which is one of the hottest, driest places on the planet. And this trail itself is not very, it doesn't have much water. It's pretty dry. And it's amazing these trees can exist. They must have roots reaching down forever to capture water. But yeah, I'm carrying with me about 3 liters of water. It's the first Saturday in September, and so still pretty hot. The temperature in the valley today is going to get up to about 111 degrees, and right now we're in probably 45 to 50 degrees. The trail began at the Wildrose Charcoal Kilns at an elevation of 6,800 feet, and Wildrose Peak is close to 9,800 feet. I'll get the exact measurement. It's not too far from that. So we're looking at 4.2 miles and ascending about, well, 3,000 feet, somewhere in that area. So it's a healthy ascent. So let's go ahead and continue, and we'll just see how long it takes to reach the summit. I think we're getting close to that ridge line of the Panamint Range, but just wanted to do a 360 here. Here you can see a very interesting rock fall. Wonder where these rocks came from. I don't see anything large enough to produce this up ahead. Who knows? Okay, there's looking in the Wildrose Peak area. And then circling around back down toward Emigrant Pass area. And then a shot of the forest here. I don't know if I'd call this Pygmy Forest. This is Pretty tall pines here. And juniper. Okay, continuing up. We should hit the ridge really soon. Oh, by the way, as I look up here, you can see an outcrop of rock there that looks like the rock fall in this area. So, boy, maybe there was a bluff like that made of this rock, but if so, it doesn't exist anymore. Must have been pulverized by the weather. And by the way, yeah, big temperature changes. Like I said, 111 down in the valley today, and probably the lowest up here is about 40 degrees, 45 degrees, but that's a pretty good stretch of temperature. And by the end of the day here, it'll be more to 85. So that's a spread of 45 degrees just in this one place. And if you take it down about 40 degrees in the winter, it can freeze and thaw just about every day, which would contribute to the cracking of these rocks here. Okay. Well, we're at the ridge, the upper ridge of the Panamint Range, and this trail that we just ascended, this last mile probably gets the majority of the 3,000 foot elevation gain. I would say probably, 1,500, maybe 1,800 feet in the mile before you hit this ridge. And so we look around here and you can see up ahead, we're on the ridge. So let's go over the edge, see what we can see. We should be able to see a sweeping view looking down into Death Valley. Let's see, maybe we need to go a little further. And there up ahead, I believe, is the ridge that descends down into the valley above the Hanaupah Canyon area. So here you see it. Yeah, you can see down into the valley from here. Just a minute, let's go just a little bit further, see if we can get a better view through the trees. Here we go. And of course the sun is rising, and so it's a little bit, there's some glare here. You can't see super clearly. Actually, this would be a great hike for the evening during the time just before sunset. And what you'd see in front of you would be just brilliant. But we're looking down now into the valley, and I would imagine we're looking down to the Devil's Golf Course area. Not sure on that. It's hard to see in the glare. But here you see, yeah, I think this ridge over here is the ridge that ascends from Hanaupah Canyon. Yes. And we'll get a better look at that from up on Wildrose Peak. But, you know, here we are, just topped the upper ridge spine of the Panamint Mountain Range. It's got a wild beauty all of its own up here. Very peaceful and just an amazing spirit. Okay, onward up the trail. Let's find Wildrose Peak up ahead. Okay, once again, here's the ridge that ascends from Hanaupah Canyon, and we saw that ridge from the Telescope Peak side. Now we're looking at it from the Wildrose Peak side. And just before you get to this rocky hill on the right, you circle around the opposite side, the left side of the hill, and you end up at the Mahogany Flat Campground area. So there you have it, the ridge that ascends all the way from the floor of Death Valley. And you can see, you know, you're in pine forest up here, and as you descend this ridge, you end up in junipers, and I think there's one juniper and one pine right on top of that hill. You can't see it from this side, but you can see it coming up from the bottom. But you can see that yeah, you descend into an area that's just barren, and then you descend further and you're into cacti, and then continue to descend and you're in the salt flats of Death Valley. So you go through quite a few climate zones. I think more climate zones than just about anywhere on earth when you ascend to Mahogany Flat from the base of Death Valley, and then continue on up to Telescope Peak, which is way over behind these hills up ahead. And you're in the bristlecone pines on Telescope Peak. So this is an amazing ridge to ascend. There are no trails, but you can pretty much make your way just by staying on the center of the ridge all the way up. You just have to watch to make sure that, especially on the return trip, that you don't take a wrong turn and head down a wrong ridge and end up way far from your point of origin. And by that time, you're probably out of water. So not a good picture. So you want to keep track of exactly where you are. But here we go, on up toward Wildrose Peak. After we hit that upper spine of the Panamint Range, it leveled off for a little bit, and then now we're on the final ascent to Wildrose Peak. Get a quick 360 just to see what things look like at this point. Definitely in the forest. Well, we weren't going up the final ascent just a bit ago. Looks like we've reached another plateau, but the reason I'm showing this is it looks like there's a lot of places you could pitch a tent in this area. And imagine the night sky that would be visible here. The stars that you would see up in the skies around. Anyway, this would be a great place to camp, pitch a tent. I'd probably sleep under the stars and not have any tent above me. But yeah, look at this. A lot of cool little spots here to camp. And I imagine that August might be a good time of year to be up here. I think that, July might be a little too warm. Not sure. But yeah, a lot of open area up here. Looks like it's nice and flat and would be awesome for a tent. Okay, let's continue on up. Continuing upward, here's the 360. And there's Wildrose Peak. First good view up here. So you can see that you head around this ridge here, up ahead, and right over to the peak. Another interesting view that you can see from here is through the trees here. Just on the left is Telescope Peak, and Rogers Peak is behind these trees. Let's see if we can get a good shot of Rogers Peak. This may not be the spot. No, there it is. There's Rogers Peak. And we'll see everything from on top of Wildrose Peak in not too long from now. I'd say there's another 500 to 700 feet to go. Here we go. There's a final saddle here. Descend a little bit and then ascend to the summit of Wildrose Peak. And just to give a 360, here we're looking down toward Emigrant Pass area. And there we're looking up toward Rogers Peak. And you can almost see the road we descended at a run last week on the way back from Telescope Peak. Continuing the 360. And this is pretty cool. You can walk through these trees here. Looks like you're just in a forest. But actually, you are right on the edge of Death Valley. Look at it opening up here. Wow. And we're looking straight down toward Furnace Creek and the Inn at Death Valley, that area. And here you can see the valley just opening up beneath us. We know Augerberry Point is somewhere in this area. Who knows? Could be this outcrop over here, but we just don't know at this point. We'll be going there at some point rather soon. It could be up on the hill there. But you can see the rugged canyons below us. And all of these look like you could ascend from the base of the valley all the way up to the place we are standing, and then from here continue on to Telescope Peak. So There's a lot of access all over the Panamint Range. It's just a matter of finding the right ridge and ascending, and usually the ridges that work the best are the ridges above canyons. And you can see, for example, this ridge here looks pretty smooth, at least in that spot, although you can't count on it not dropping off dramatically at some point. But a lot of exploring to do. Looking down into the Furnace Creek area, let's see if we can get a closer shot. It should be right down in this area. Not entirely sure, but that would be my guess. Which would put Golden Canyon to the right of that area. And then, of course, you've got the Funeral Mountains up behind. And then we're on the final stretch for Wildrose Peak. And as you can imagine, we are heading up Switchbacks. I think that most of the ascent is in two areas. One is the stretch, the mile stretch before you get to the ridge of the Panamint Range, and then the second stretch, of course you're level for a while, and then the second ascent of, I don't know, 800 feet or so is right before you get to the summit of Wildrose Peak. And so here we are on the Switchbacks, continuing on. We're closing in on the summit of Wildrose Peak, and lots of views opening up below us. And here you see Death Valley, looking down into the Furnace Creek area. Circling around. And over here, you can see Rogers Peak, and behind it, just the tip of Telescope Peak emerging to the left of Rogers Peak. Rogers Peak has the radio towers on it. And we're still going up Switchbacks here. But we're at that point where you just don't think it could continue to ascend that much more. We'll see. Here we go. Definitely lots of photo ops on this trail. Every time we go around a corner, we can see something different that adds to the interest of the view of Death Valley below. And to give you a 360, we are very close to the summit at this point. There you can see Rogers Peak and Telescope Peak in the distance. So let's just continue up this trail. Here we go. We're nearly at the summit, but this is quite a view of Rogers Peak with Telescope Peak in the background, and then you can trace the Rogers Peak access road all the way down to Mahogany Flat, and then you can trace it descending further between Mahogany Flat and the charcoal kilns. We'll do a quick 360. They're looking down toward the Death Valley area. The trail we have just ascended levels off a little bit here, and I believe the summit's right up ahead here. So we'll get another 360 from the summit. You know, like Telescope Peak, this is another saddle summit. So I thought I would be standing on the summit at this point, and instead there's just a little bit more to go. So down and up that saddle, and then we'll be on the true summit. But let's just do a 360 at this point, because I think we're going to see more of the Telescope Peak area from this summit than from the next. And of course, we've got the Bennett Peak long needle cacti here, 2 to 3 inches long. These guys are just amazing and needle sharp. Do not stub your toe on them, because they will stay in your toe for the rest of the day and maybe a lot longer. And there is a healthy little community of them up here on Wildrose Peak. Let's continue on to the summit. On Wildrose Peak summit. Let's just take a look around here. Okay, there we are looking down on Death Valley, and almost directly over to the Furnace Creek area, which would be, let's see if we can put it right over the summit box. Yeah, there it is. So if you just look up from the summit box, just a little bit past the base of the valley, that's Furnace Creek and the inn. And let's zoom in on that. There's the oasis at Furnace Creek. And then just above that, a little bit to the right, would be the inn at Death Valley. Oops. Lost myself here. Okay, so looking around the summit, this is what you see on the summit of Wildrose Peak. And then, you know, looking down to the Emigrant Canyon area, circling around. Let's see. Yeah, the Sierra Nevada mountains would be, they're a little more clear than they were when I was on top of Telescope Peak. They would be right in the center there. I'm going to create a slide on this page to show a better view that's been photoshopped so you can really see those mountains. But circling around, there's Wildrose Peak with the communication towers, and behind it, Telescope Peak. And a little bit to the right, and it looks like down just slightly, would be Panamint Peak. Then continuing to circle around, there's the other side of this saddle summit. Just have to have the skull and crossbones since we're in Death Valley. At least in the national park. There you can see down the valley to the south, and then panning around and there's the valley to the north. So there you have it. Wildrose Peak. Looks like there's yet another little summit over there. So let's just go over there and see what we can see looking down from there. But this completes the 360 from this summit. Okay, I'm glad I came over here. Some really beautiful marble, white marble here. Scattered around on this summit. Let's start over at Wildrose Peak and Telescope Peak. We'll just pan around this way. And we've seen the valley here. And straight ahead, Sierra Nevada. I hope it shows better on the video than I'm seeing on the screen here. A lot of glare. And then looking over down this way, you can see Emigrant Pass Road below us. And I believe that those roads that, or that road that you can see there, if you look carefully, it's right in the center. I would almost bet that that's going up to Augury Point, which means that that area up there is Augury Point. Looks like there's a lot of trails in these hills. If you look carefully, you can see a number of places people have walked. And then looking over at the true summit of Wildrose Peak. So yeah, I just wanted to take a look at this area. It looked kind of interesting. artistic plants up here. Okay, there you have it. Wildrose Peak. Got down Charcoal Kiln Road and over to Emigrant Pass Road and 360. We're near the end of this adventure, almost back at the charcoal kilns. We'll get a shot of those from above. But in the meantime, here's a shot. I think it was too dark earlier in the morning to catch this one. Closing in on the charcoal kilns. You can see them below us and ahead. Amazing structures. I don't think I've got a shot of the back of the kilns, but there they are. Okay, this concludes our day on Wildrose Peak. And of course, we have to echo it inside the charcoal kilns. We've ascended about 3,000 feet along this, and we've traversed the spine of the Panamint Range. Got some great shots of Death Valley. Okay, time to make my exit. Signing off.